إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب.
Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day are signs for those of understanding.
الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار.
Who remember Allah while standing or sitting or lying on their sides, and give thought to the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, Our Lord, you did not create this aimlessly. Exalted are you above such a thing. Then protect us from the punishment of the fire.
صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you everyone for joining. This webinar series is brought to you by USAID's Higher Education System Strengthening Activity, or HESSA. HESSA is a 5-year USAID-funded project working closely with the HEC and 16 public sector universities across Pakistan, focusing on capacity building, introducing relevant and sustainable policy reforms, and fostering academia-industry linkages to improve graduate employability. HESSA has recently initiated Pakistan Climate Resilience Research Coordination Network to advance the capability of researchers to co-produce science-to-action, interdisciplinary research, education, and workforce development. With this brief introduction, I would hand over to Professor Dr. Mohammad Fahim Khokhar from NUST, who is the organizer and moderator of today's webinar. Over to you, Dr. Fahim.
Thanks for setting the stage. So I formally welcome you all for this very important webinar series. So we're trying to host the first one series, NUST, in collaboration with all the HESSA partners, including the international partner as well. So this theme was chosen by keeping in view the current climate change scenario situation, and we tried our level best to provide you very vital information and the ungrounded information, and we tried to select the speakers which can enlighten your insight and give you a very vital information about ungrounded realities. For that, I will be talking about first for a few minutes about the climate change scenarios in Pakistan and what kind of challenges we are experiencing in Pakistan. And then followed by, there will be presentation from Director of Operations, Mr. Imdad and Siddiqui. I will briefly introduce when his term will be there. And then finally, Mr. Tauqeer Sheikh, a very well-known climatist and environmentalist of Pakistan. He will be giving us insight about the opportunities that are available to make Pakistan a climate resilient Pakistan. So let me share screen. My screen visible to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about climate change-induced challenges in Pakistan. And everybody, especially in Pakistan, has experienced a lot of witness, actually. Most of you might have witnessed the climate change-induced challenges or disasters in Pakistan. So let me set the ground for this. We are living in a world of exponential growth, and it has huge tolls, especially a substantial tolls is on the natural resources and in particularly on the environment. Because whatever we are utilizing as a part of having more population or industrial development or other sort of development in the socioeconomic circles, it has a huge toll on the atmosphere, because a lot of release of atmospheric gases, and especially the greenhouse gases, they are accumulated in the atmosphere, and they disturbs the balance of natural system. That actually results in accumulation of various greenhouse gases, and ultimately we have the climate change impacts in the form of global warming and disturbances in the precipitation patterns and some others, which are very well known to all of you. So the main reason behind all this is mainly because of the release of greenhouse gases, in particularly CO2, that we have reached this year the levels of 421 ppm globally. And so in just a fraction of 250 years, we have released that much atmospheric CO2 accumulated in the atmosphere that nature probably have taken 600 million years to accommodate this CO2 in the atmosphere. So as a consequence of that, we have a variety or a list of implications that we're experiencing at the micro level and the macro level as well. For instance, the latest report from IPCC 2022, the 6th assessment report, they have shared the following the list of climate impacts with high scientific confidence level, that says climate impacts and the risk that will experience across the Asia, other than the rest of the world as well. So I primarily talk from Asia. So the ecosystem will be largely disturbed. There will be loss of habitat. Flora and fauna will be largely impacted directly through the heat waves, drought conditions, and disturbances in the precipitation patterns. And there is another recent phenomena that we have experienced in Pakistan, only particular to Pakistan. Before, we didn't have that much wildfires caused by the heat waves. Last year, we have this forest fires in the Chilmoza forest of Balochistan and some part of KP as well. And then we have cryospheric impacts, which increase of drought conditions, and we're likely to increase drought conditions about 20% by the end of century. We moved into the water scarce country since a couple of years back. There is a lot of health issues, especially waterborne diseases have been spread in the colder regime of Pakistan, like dengue spread in the Swat and the Peshawar districts, is a real manifestation of global warming. Then hotter summers, that is resulting in increase of energy demand, and a country like Pakistan, which is already suffering power outages, has a huge toll on the socioeconomic, as in the form of socioeconomic disruptions. So then there is also implications on urban migration that plays a significant role in enhancing the impact of climate change in the urban settlement by putting pressures on the existing infrastructures. And last but not the least, this is the increase in floods and the droughts together with heat stress. And the floods from 2022 is the real manifestation of all these things, that we have experienced a mega floods and with the huge socioeconomic losses and damages. Mr. Imdad and Hussain Siddiqui will be talking about this a little later. So let me show you some scientific evidence. Let me show you some scientific evidence that we have experienced in the form of temperature anomaly. What we use, we have temperature anomaly for 97 stations across the Pakistan. And you see here in this picture that after 1997, we actually shifted towards the warmer regime in Pakistan. And the temperature anomaly has already crossed 1 degree Celsius, being 2016, the hottest year on the record. And then if you look at the precipitation anomaly over here for the same data we use from Pakistan Meteorological Department, for 97 stations across the Pakistan over the last 30 years. You see the anomaly or the patterns in precipitation distribution is quite inconsistent. So it's mainly driven by some other large-scale circulation like ANSO circulation. For instance, the blue bars are actually very much influenced by the La Nina conditions, and the red one are mainly suffered by the El Nino conditions, and also the drought and other global warming conditions as well. So we try to figure out how this has impacted the monsoon system in Pakistan widely. So we try to figure out the spatial shift in observed monsoon pattern here. What you see, the gray line is actually, but by the way, we use both the satellite and the ground observation here. The ground observations are in the form of these circles with some plus and minus signs. Plus signs mean there have been increase in these stations, and the minus signs mean there has been decrease over this. So the red line is actually the 2010 to 2016 onward data, which tells us there has been a southeastward shift, a southward shift in the regime of 2.5 millimeter per day precipitation. And if you look at the 4 millimeter per day precipitation, so it has shrunken, but it is mainly confined towards south and towards east as well. So what's about the temporal changes? We also try to look at, is there any temporal shift in the monsoon pattern or not? We'll try to look for the precipitation regime, and this is again the same base year and then the consequent years, and the yellow line is giving you the total number of rainfall events. So by the definition, the rainfall event is only in definition by the by the PMD, that only rainy day will be considered when the minimum rainfall is 2.5 millimeter a day. So if you look at, there has been a substantial decrease in total rainfall, but the number of rainy days is slightly decreased, which is just minus 5 days. So that tells us that means there have been substantial decrease in rainfall, but the rainfall intensity has increased over the years. So similarly, we try to look whether there is any change in the post-monsoon rainfall season. So that has shifted slightly towards the post-monsoon season. Again, the yellow line is giving you the total number of rainy days and the total rainfall in by the blue bar. So there have been increase in total rainfall, and also the number of rain days has increased. So that actually support our hypothesis that there not only the spatial shift in the monsoon patterns, but also there have been a temporal shift in the monsoon pattern as well. Okay, so just I have listed the very few events that have been experienced in Pakistan during last 2 decades. So we have experienced devastating impacts in Pakistan in the form of heat waves and droughts. Now the heat waves are getting more common. And for instance, heat wave in 2015 in Karachi has toll of 1,200 deaths. And now recently we have a severe heat wave in 2022, followed by devastating floods. And then the glacial lake outburst floods are very common in Pakistan nowadays. There are only 30 gulfs were identified during June 2022 summer. And there are a lot of highly vulnerable lakes that have been identified as a potential gulf risk. And then we have devastating floods, historical starting back in 1992, 95. And then we have in 2010, this mega flood, which is again a common phenomena that is taking place in Pakistan. The intensity and severity of floods is getting very high and increasing the loss and damages. This is clear manifestation during what we experienced in 2022. And then we have very indirect impact, like the change in precipitation and temperature regime has caused indirect impact on the yield of various mainstream crops like wheat, rice, and cotton crops. And so these are actually a few, but there are a lot of list of the implication that we experience as a consequence of climate change in Pakistan, directly and indirectly. The biggest the challenge, for instance, here, this is, I just want to show you, this is like outlook for the year 2022 monsoon pattern. So the year where we have maximum flood, we have a maximum forecast for this season was there back in April 2022, but this is exactly what happened. We have huge amount of rainfall in a short span of time. Overall, Pakistan has experienced 251% above normal precipitation, and especially in Sindh, it was 700% more rainfall above normal. So that has huge implication in the socio-economic regime. For instance, the latest reports were that there will be increase in poverty from 3 to 4%, and moving 8 to 9 million people below the poverty line, and almost US $33 billion was expected, the cost of habitation and the damages that was caused by the devastating floods. So this was again the outlook that has further challenges, and the consequent in the Pakistan's economic growth as well, that Pakistan's economy will be hampered by this almost 50% reduction in the economic development in Pakistan, as this is as a consequence of this 2022 flood events. So I will not go into further details for this 2022 flood because my co-speaker is going to enlighten you about this in other details. So finally, I will stop here, but just sharing with you the take-home message is that climate change is an indisputable reality, and it has huge toll on Pakistan's socioeconomic circles. So estimates are currently in progress, and that what have been initially reported that might increase many folds. So a myth that someone else will do it, it's totally not true. So you have to do it yourself. There is nobody else will help, and Mr. Imdad is going to tell us about that. Thank you very much. So now I will move to the second speaker. Let me take this opportunity to introduce my second speaker of the day. But before, I just want to tell the audience that if you have any question, you can use the question and answers tab at the bottom of your screen. And you can keep writing and mentioning the speakers and whatever the question you have. We'll try to answer your question during the course of this webinar. But if somebody is left, we'll make sure that every question has been answered via email, or if you still did not receive any response, then you can write emails to ask your question, and then we will try to answer all your queries. So let me take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Imdad Siddiqui. He is Director of Operations, Provincial Disaster Management Authority from Government of Sindh, Pakistan. Presently, he's working as a Director of Operations, and particularly in the Rehabilitation Department of PDMA-Sindh. He has done his MS in Public Administration and LLB, and he earned both professional degrees from University of Karachi. And currently he's enrolled in PhD in Human Resources Management at IBA, University of St. Jamshoro. Over to you, Imdad Hussain Sahab. He is going to speak about the on-ground realities, the loss and damages witnessed by Mr. Imdad Hussain during his operations in the province of Sindh as a part of his duties, professional obligations in the field caused by the 2022 massive flood. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fahim Sahab, for providing such an best opportunity in my career. I would formally welcome all online participants to the webinar and wish you a very good day ahead. As Dr. Saab has made a very good presentation, therefore I have escaped many slides to avoid repetition of information as shared by Dr. Fahim Sahab. As we know that our country has experienced one of its wettest monsoon season this year since 1961 to 2022. Continuous torrential rains caused heavy flood in eastern and southern Balochistan, Sindh, southwest Punjab, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The Sindh province was not only impacted by the rains, but also due to floods caused by the heavy rain in mountains, Khokhar and Suleiman Range, lying along the border of Sindh and Balochistan. The heaviest rainfall history is also depicted here from 1961 to 2022. The highest precipitation recorded at Padidan district Nosher of Feroz, that is 764 mm. 16.43% of 140,900 kilometer area was inundated during floods 2022. Here is the comparative analysis. On 4th August 2022, both sides of the Indus River were clear, but on 28th August 2022, both sides were widely inundated, as seen from the satellite images. Khambar district was one of the most affected districts, almost inundated on 28 August. Same situation with district Shikarpur, it was largely inundated. Yes, here are the states regarding losses and damages occurred during flood 2022. 1,090 people were reported died during the floods. More than 8,000 people were reported injured. 436,000 plus livestock perished. 12.35 million population affected. 7.3 million populated people were displaced. Standing crop on 3.7 million was damaged. If we talk about infrastructure damages, 2.08 million houses were damaged by flood and heavy rains during floods 2022. 8,463 roads, 165 bridges, and 2,125 causeways were damaged during floods 2022. Here is the segregation of death and injuries district-wise. 431 male, 215 female, 444 children were died. 2,964 male, 2,211 female, 3,247 children were injured. Here is the district and division-wise breakup of death and injuries. Rains along cumulative effect of water flowing in Sindh occurred in most populated lands of Sindh. Here is the state of displaced population and affected population, is also discussed earlier. Next. This is the division-wise states of the population affected and displaced population. Next. Next. 3.7, as I earlier told you, the acres were damaged. Next. This is the division-wise breakup of crop damages. In 24 districts, 1,333 union councils were affected and they were declared calamity hit by the government of Sindh. This is the infrastructure damages breakup division-wise. Pictorial evidence of damages occurred during flood 2022. As we know that during flood emergency in Sindh, thousands of families were shelterless on roadside sites or on elevated places around their villages waiting for tents as the number of villages were severely disturbed by the floods. PDMA provided the shelter to the displaced families in flood-affected areas of Sindh province. Shelters were provided to 7.3 million displaced homeless people with average family size comprising of 6 people. About 1.2 million persons were facilitated through shelters and establishment of 2,900 plus relief camps by district disaster management authorities. In addition to tents, tarpaulin, mosquito nets, animal mosquito nets, jerry can, bed sheets, pillows, and kitchen sets were also provided to the flood affectees during flood 2022. As far as the food was provided by the PDMA-Sindh during the disaster, the state is being reflected. This is the pictorial evidence of relief operation carried out by the PDMA-Sindh with the support of armed forces, NDMA and DDMAs and district administration, provincial line departments, and federal ministries. Yes, MHRV. The PDMA-Sindh has got carried out MHRV on flood, drought, heat wave, cyclone, and storm, earthquake, and tsunami in all 30 districts of the province. It has been carried out at Union Council level. The outcomes of MHRV is production of atlases and provincial and district-wise MHRV informed disaster management plans and online DMIS. This is the MHRV scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassa, for this enlightening us with the ground facts, what you have witnessed during your operation in the province of Sindh. Now, I would like to open the question and answer session. So please raise your hand, then we'll come back to you by giving you a chance to answer your queries, whatever you have. Please raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. You can select the reaction tab and then post your question, or you can speak about the question so we can have. So then we will have a question and answer session for 15 minutes, and then we will have the third speaker of the day that is going to speak about the climate resilience potential of Pakistan. Asab, I have one question, if you allow me. Then actually, there was a question from Dr. Nur Ali Samud, and he asked me what measures are taken by PDMA in climate resilience in future. Although I had answered him, but I would like that if you could share some light on this.
Dr. Saab, thank you. Actually, I would like to apprise that the PDMA-Sindh is going to establish DRR wing at the headquarters, and PDMA-Sindh, in collaboration with various INGOs, NGOs, UN agencies, has been working on CBDRM, SBDRM, and strengthening of DDMAs in the province of Sindh to secure the people from losses and damages which might be occurred in case of disasters coming.
Okay, thank you. So, Miss Gulalai or Mr. Gulalai, I don't know, but there was the same question, and then there is a question from Professor Altaf Ali Sayad. So, Sindh is the most vulnerable to climate change effects. What do you suggest to mitigate its impact in Sindh? So, I guess the main PDMA's main stake is to rehabilitate the people. And then this is like the central or Sindh government's jurisdiction that they have to go for the adaptation and mitigation strategies. And PDMA is actually the execution partners, probably. So their primary task is to rehabilitate or provide relief-related activities to the affectees. So then... how it said there's a lot of question about the same, so on the similar lines. For instance, here there is a question: how can we overcome and do preparedness for the same? It's a very important aspect of preparedness. So can you please tell us something about preparedness at PDMA level?
Yes, Dr. Saab. Actually, we have planned trainings for the communities for community resilience purposes. And as far as rehabilitation and relief is concerned, the government of Sindh has made a company, the naming Sindh People's Housing Foundation, that has been mandated to reconstruct the houses damaged during floods 2022. Almost 2 million houses are being reconstructed in the province. And
Okay.
those are resilient based, with a resilient based structure to avoid loss future.
Yeah. So yeah, I will totally agree with the professor. What about the preparedness? Whoever is asked. So it's a very common phrase and right-hand rule that if you spend $1 in preparedness, you save $9 in the after post disaster relief operations. So preparedness should be the key part of the PDMAs as well, but as Imdad Sahab has mentioned that they have established disaster risk reduction center at PDMA, and they are trying to spread the awareness among the stakeholders and all these things. So this is going to help a lot. So let me look into the list. There's another question. This is, what's about the density of lightning event because of weather shift as discussed, damage to the power infrastructure? Very interesting question. Meteorological department is that regarding this thunderstorm activities. I'm not sure whether PMD is actually recording the thunderstorm activities. Most probably they are not. And because so far, what I knew, there are some satellite observation which are available. But globally, not at Pakistan. I mean, it falls in that lightning. But there is no study that has actually linked so far, as per my knowledge, that has linked the lightning events increase in density of lightning event relating to the climate change. But obviously, there could be some linkages if there has been changes in large-scale circulation of the weather, the monsoon patterns, and then so there might be the link to the change in cloud regime, and then definitely because the intense rains are very obvious over Pakistan. So in principle, it could be possibility that there have been certain linkages, but there is not enough scientific evidence available so far. Okay, then we have a question from Noor M. Khan. Can you elaborate how urban flooding has modeled in MHRV in Sindh? I guess this goes to Imdad Sahab. And let me quickly go to the other question as well. Then I will let Imdad Sahab to answer these queries. If we look apart from floods, what does PDMA plan for climate resilience in the wake of cyclone threats like we saw with the cyclone Biparjoy? And then there is another question, how is mental health embedded in climate change or resilience building initiatives in Pakistan? Dr. Saida Nas. So I will answer your question first, and then I will let Imdad Sahab to answer the other two questions. Yeah, climate change and health, they are very important. The climate change has a huge implication in health sector, definitely. So mental health is also very important, but unfortunately that is a very ignored sector in Pakistan. So we need to raise awareness among the stakeholders and the general public to work on the mental health. And obviously, mental health is the first indicator, first receptor that the climate change outcomes or consequent can actually hamper very badly. Over to you, Imdad Sahab.
Dr. Saab, as I earlier apprised that the MHRV was carried out with the support of SUPARCO, and considering the urban flooding factors in the MHRV assessment. That is it from my side.
Okay, sure. This is basically hydrological modeling that is actually supported by the SPARCO, and the satellite imageries. Probably they have normally some risk assessment have already done, but I'm not familiar with the MHRV in Sindh what they have done. But normally there should be risk assessment maps that is available with PDMA or something.
Actually, the technical assistance was provided by the SUPARCO.
Okay.
We had engaged them, and the total technical assistance was provided by them based on the risk assessment maps and satellite imageries.
Yes. And what's about the cyclones like Biparjoy that have been very devastating this time? I mean, at least they have, it slightly skipped the Pakistan, but still it has repercussions in Pakistan as well, especially in the coastal region.
Yes, we have taken benefit from the vulnerability risk assessment during the Biparjoy operations in Sindh.
Okay, so normally you have a special cell that deals with the cyclone type of threats as well, yes?
Yes, we have the cell which deals with the multi-hazards risk vulnerability.
Okay, then there is a question or comment, I would say, rather it's more comment. Okay, then followed by the question as well. From Professor Roma Gill from FGAW, that considering the several non-government organizations are operational in this region, it seems there is an urgent need of public-private coordination and integration to make Pakistan climate resilient. Does the PDMA consider this aspect as well? Sir, public-private coordination.
Yes, it is must. And if I talk about floods 2022, all NGOs, all INGOs, humanitarian organizations, UN agencies were taken on board, and it was a joint venture. We managed the huge disaster. It has been witnessed by everybody around the globe.
Okay, then linked to this one, there is a question from Dr. Zafar that's asking if you could quote any good example where the climate-induced disaster has been risk has been covered or lowered through the PDMA's implementation plan or something like that.
Yes, as I already shared that we conduct CBDRM, and the trainings is the part of CBDRM for community awareness programs to make our communities better resilient to the disasters.
Okay, so then question is from CHS. What's about the community level organization if they are trained into sport in future, especially in, and the similar question was posed by Anila Ali. How important is to teach survival skills to the people living at high risk area? I guess there's no question about the importance of this skill to provide to the layman's as a emergency response to these resilient risk to these disasters and emergency relief operation and first aid type of skills that should be imparted to layman levels as well. There's no question about that.
Input from my side is that we engage the CBOs, community-based organizations, in trainings.
So in principle, they are in place already.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me check if I skip any question or not. So any other question from the audience? So how effectively इमदाद साहब आपका जो ये आपने एक mention किया था MHRV system is effectively is in place actually since how long? Was that developed after flood 2022 or it's already there?
Actually, MHRV has been done in this year, in 2023. It has been made this year. But the MHVRA was continued.
Okay, yeah. So then, sir, one more question to you. Does PDMA coordinate with K Electric Karachi, Water Sewerage Board, SSGs to ensure the utilities remain uninterrupted during disaster events?
Yes, we coordinate with all utility service providers, including the K Electric, SSGC, Karachi Water and Sewerage Boards, and building control authorities, DMCs, cantonment boards, almost all the provincial line departments and the utility service providers.
Okay, then there is a question, why PMD data is not available for research to R&D organizations? Yes, I agree with you. It's not that easy way to get data, but still it is available, especially the monthly data is available. But I totally agree with you. This data should be largely available in various capacities, and it is much needed point that you have raised that the PMD data should be available largely for R&D institutes. And then there's questions here, how many climate migrants are there in Sindh if PDMA has any current data?
If we talk about people prefer to leave their villages during the disasters and they repatriate to their villages. And actually, we don't have the exact number right now that how many people migrated due to the climate change. But as far as my experience is concerned, the people prefer during the disaster to leave their villages, and once the disaster is over, they go back to their villages.
Okay, very important question, sir. I would love to ask this question that did you have done your assessment so far? No, because there is a question from Dr. Noor Ali Samon. How much losses seem in financial economy caused by the last year's flood?
Actually, damage assessment was done by the federal government with the support of armed forces and provincial governments and DDMAs. I think the losses were counted in billions of dollars.
Is there any concrete number? Like in the very beginning, there was like 30 to 33 billion US dollar losses and damages caused by.
Now I don't have the accurate numbers. That is why I avoid to give a silly number.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Any other question from the audience, please? There's another question from Ms. Anila Ali that does PDMA, especially Balochistan, provide grants to conduct trainings for capacity building of local people?
Actually, the PDMAs are independent, and I represent PDMA-Sindh in capacity of director operations. It's better to ask this from PDMA Balochistan. They could be able to advise.
I totally agree because it's PDMA Balochistan might be the right one to answer this question. Okay, then there's another question that has the adaptation plan for floods and climate disasters been developed alongside indigenous communities with their representation?
Yes.
I would like to answer this question first and then Imdad sir perhaps. So in principle, it should be like this, the adaptation plan which has prepared by the government of Pakistan. So the next speaker has been very much involved in such kind of policy documents. So we will please keep your question for the last speaker of the day. So Imdad sir, do you have any insight about that as well?
Yes, sir. Very simple answer to Dr. Sarah Saiba's question. Yes, we have the adaptation plan for floods and climate disaster developed alongside indigenous communities with their representation. Yes, we have adaptation plan.
Okay, so thank you, Imdad sir. Thank you very much for your generous insight and information that you have provided us and answered all the questions. And so let's, keeping in view the time constraint, let me introduce the third speaker of the day. Mr. Tauqeer Sheikh is currently the foremost expert on environmental climate change in the country. He is one of the architects of Pakistan climate change agenda and is the globally known expert representing the climate-induced concerns of Pakistan at international forums in Asia, Africa, Europe, and Americas. He has represented in Pakistan in several climate change negotiations at various COPs. And Mr. Sheikh has devoted his life promoting sustainable development in Pakistan. He has supported several federal and provincial governments to develop their climate policies and implementation plans, including the development of National Climate Change Policy in 2012, as well as subsequent provincial climate policies in Punjab and Sindh. He is the principal author of Pakistan's Nationally Determined Contribution, NDC, submitted to UNFCCC in 1921. Presently, Mr. Sheikh is a member of Pakistan's Climate Change Council, chaired by Prime Minister of Pakistan, as well as the Task Force on Green Financing, recently constituted by the Prime Minister, and the Task Force on Climate Change and Environment set up by the Government of Punjab. So today he's going to talk about the climate change, resilience in Pakistan, challenges, and the way forwards. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Saab, for your very kind introduction. Let me begin by saying that climate change is the biggest security threat to Pakistan. Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's civilization, and Pakistan's well-being. At the same time, it's the biggest development opportunity. So instead of looking at it only as a threat, I think we as stakeholders need to look at it as an opportunity, because at the end of the day, climate change threat and climate change opportunity are two sides of the same coin. The less we see it as an opportunity, less prepared will we be to respond or to tackle climate change. And before I proceed further, oftentimes in the discourse in Pakistan is dominated by 2 points. One, excuse me, that Pakistan is world's one of the most vulnerable countries, which is, as scientists you will know, it's incorrect. Any neighborhood that is directly exposed to any extreme weather event is the most vulnerable location or geography. It's a bogus science. Climate change is not like a laser beam that attacks only one place. So we are not one of the most vulnerable countries. We are, of course, one of those countries who have multiple sources of climate threats, ranging from seawater intrusion to glacial melt and everything in between, including droughts and including tropical storms and heat waves and so on and so forth. And second thing that we say, and therefore as scientists, I think it's a responsibility to recognize that yes, Pakistan is a vulnerable country like all other countries, but most importantly, we need to do research on the multiple sources of threats that we have. And those threats coincide with each other. In a given month, you will know that Pakistan may be facing more than one threat concurrently. Our glaciers may be melting and we may have a heat wave somewhere else, and so on and so forth. And the second point is that our emissions are less than 1%, and therefore the world is unfair with us. That is true partially only. I want to highlight 2 points. There are more than 100 countries that have less than 1% emissions. So the world is unfair to most of them. But the important thing is that the rate of emissions growth is too high in Pakistan, and it cannot be justified. Most of Nordic countries or Australia have emissions very comparable to Pakistan. Therefore, the energy efficiency level that helps you reduce the cost of development is much higher there than in our case. The result is that we do not get enough economic returns for each unit of energy that we use. And oftentimes our energy is imported and oftentimes it's fossil fuel based. And therefore, it adds to our bind of economic vulnerability, social vulnerability, and economic vulnerability. So the 1% argument that we are victim is true only to the extent that historically Pakistan's emissions have not been very high. And in percentage terms of global emissions, our share is not very high. But when we look at the internal inequity in the country of energy, we think we are very, very inequitable society. Some of us, including myself, consume as if we are living in Manhattan, but most of us consume as if they are still living in the Mughal period 250 years ago. Fortunately, the threat and opportunity element that I explained to you is very much in sync with the global discourse. Therefore, the opportunities for Pakistan to focus on those or when international partners and friends, and including climate finance or climate lending or private sector investments, will be in sync with the global discourse. I will quickly read 4 or 5 points without explaining them, and you will see that they are at the heart of global discourse. One discourse, as you saw last week at the global summit, climate summit in New York, they talk about deep ambition, which means very high upfront reduction in emissions. Global discourse is about transformational change that let's invest in our economic systems to have a transformation that is very much the need for Pakistan also. Global discourse is on net zero emissions. Pakistan has not committed by when it will become net zero, but Paris Agreement requires from all countries to reach that point by a certain years that they need to determine. There is international climate finance, and Pakistan has not secured even 0.1% of that, which means finance is available, but our capacity, our competence, our ability to develop bankable projects without relying on intermediaries is very nominal. And we have not been able to access any of climate change windows. And all the finances that we got in the last 2 decades, or decade and a half since the climate finances came into being, have been through intermediaries, not our direct submission. And then we know that there is a carbon market. We know that there is a carbon trading. We know there's a concept of carbon offsets. And we know that blue carbons, meaning by the ability of the mangroves to serve as a sink, is very high. And that is a market or a potential that we have not even availed, but the global discussion is there. There's a global discussion on reducing fossil fuel subsidies. We are facing it's a difficult thing to do, but we are facing that challenge under IMF conditionalities to reduce subsidies. But we are very selective on this. We are reducing subsidies on the fuel that is purchased by many people, but not necessarily on gas and to some sectors like so on and so forth. There are several examples where we are very inequitable in our subsidies, and we are not touching many subsidies that go to the rich and the privileged. There's a discussion globally on phasing out coal. In our case, I think there's a discussion how to expand that. Pakistan's import for last 5-6 years of quality fuel has been increasing tremendously, including from Afghanistan, from where we imported $40 million worth of, $400 million worth of fuel only last year. There's a discussion globally on loss and damage facility. Pakistan was very active on that in the last COP, but our ability to access those finances is as nominal as it is from Green Climate Fund and others. There's a global discussion on just transition, saying that those who are on the wrong end of the stick, are poor and marginalized on marginalized or fragile ecosystems, should not be the losers. Losers should be losers of people like me who have a lifestyle of rich and famous and burn in our homes and in our transportation and air travels. So, in other words, what I've just highlighted to you with the help of these bullets, all the issues that are under discussion globally are relevant for Pakistan. I just want to make two more points and then I'll conclude. One point, I hope we understand that there's a difference between extreme weather events and slow onset. Extreme weather events such as floods and droughts, floods and torrential rains and heat waves is not climate change. It's the result of climate change. It's the impact of climate change. Even if there was no climate change, they would be happening, but their frequency and their ferocity will be not as serious as it is now. And the science has now progressed to attribute each extreme weather event to climate change in percentage terms. And in fact, the modeling has become so sophisticated that it can be done at two levels. One is on real-time basis. While Katrina is happening, you can run your models and figure out what percentage of Katrina can be attributed to climatic changes. And second, it can be used for future projections. And that is also being done very seriously in a very large scale for hedging or pricing. For example, if I want to grow wheat, there's someone there who can tell you that what will be the pricing, what will be the weather or the likelihood of heat waves during that season of wheat in 2028, by way of example, 5 years ahead. And based on that, they can do the hedging and stocking and determine the pricing short term, medium term, and long term. So the predictability of extreme weather events has increased tremendously. It's used as an instrument by insurance industry. It's used as an insurance by the stockist, by trade markets, like cotton trade stock exchange and carbon stock exchange and the rest of it. And therefore, we should not think that the extreme weather events, they cause us so much. Last year in 2022, we lost almost $30 billion. But please don't think that is the climate change. It's the result of climate change. But also I want to highlight a very important point for an academic setting of this sort. Each one of the extreme weather events is not nationally bound, it's regional. Let me try to explain to you. Let's say heat wave. If summer sets in, it comes in India first, it's very predictable that it will be coming to Pakistan. Floods, tropical storms, water availability, diminishing returns on agriculture, accelerating land degradation, disappearing timber products, growing vulnerabilities because of growing population, growing middle class, and urbanization. Narrowing dietary menu. More and more of us are eating fewer and fewer things, and therefore we are losing on nutrients and micronutrients, and there are many millions of victims for malnutrition and stunting. And therefore, you look at all of these, such as floods and torrential rains and tropical storms, and so on, they have regional implications, and therefore, in many ways, all of Pakistan's domestic extreme weather event related issues in climate change are regional issues. You have heat waves in Afghanistan, we'll have flooding in Nowshera. You have heat waves in India, our glaciers will melt and we'll have flooding downstream, and so on and so forth. And the second point I wanted to make is that the real climate change is the slow onset. And that is measured in the brackets of 2 decades, 20 years. So in the last century, we had 5 sets of data to compare. And in this sense, you have only one. So if I look at last 120 years, we can measure with 6 indicators that how was it in 1900 and how does 2000s compare with that. Now, which means it's a decadal process. It's oftentimes imperceptible. It's slow, even though it's accelerating much more rapidly with much faster speed than the IPCC projections that anticipated. So the acceleration of slow onset is extremely high. Now, just the way the extreme weather events were previously seen as standalone. If you have heat wave in Karachi, you thought you'll have only the heat wave. If you have drought in Thar or Thar Parker, you will think, okay, it's a drought only. Now we see that each extreme weather event triggers other extreme weather events. In IPCC reports, it is called CID, Combined Impact Drivers. So a heat wave can trigger torrential rains, and so are the other extreme weather events, as I gave you some examples. So coming back to, in that context, to the slow onset, it results in degradation of your ecosystem, their productive capacity, the yield and the nutritional value of your yield. It changes the patterns, weather patterns such as monsoon that can come sooner or later or become much more serious, much more frequently. Heat waves in upper Indus Basin and things of this sort. So you see that the extreme weather events on which we focus quite a bit is oftentimes in a country like ours at the cost of scientific research and study and modeling of slow onset. And for an academic audience like this, I wanted to distinguish between the two and highlight for us to the need to focus on both. I want to thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh, for enlightening us with your very important insight about the issues and the challenges we are facing in Pakistan caused by climate change. If your schedule allow, can we go for like 5 to 10 minutes question and answer session?
Most certainly, sir. Most certainly, I'm available.
Okay, great. So I'll open the floor for question and answer session as we did earlier. And if you have a question, please write it down. I will read them, and then Ali Saab or Imdad Saab are still there, so we can answer your question. So, sir, there is one question asked by Sarah Junaid. Does the National Adaptation Plan consider ways in which green financing can be tapped for Pakistan? Has work done to highlight existing green projects in Pakistan as insurance to receive funding from green finance opportunities?
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. National Adaptation Plan is now official. It has been approved by the cabinet. In principle, any green project, whether or not you have a National Adaptation Plan, can apply for international climate finance. So it's not a precondition to have National Adaptation Plan. If you go to the COP next month or in December to UAE, nobody will ask you that whether or not you have a National Adaptation Plan. Everybody will ask you what the status of the implementation of this plan or the policy that you had earlier or the NDC that you had approved earlier. So to begin with, I wanted to de-emphasize the criticality to have National Adaptation Plan. But now that you have it, it raises 2 more questions. One is who will implement it, and the implementation is at the provincial level. Climate change and the projects or the areas of intervention mentioned there are the provincial subjects. So in some ways, the question will be whether or not the provinces will develop any green financing projects to apply. I want to give you a difficult answer here so that to spur your thinking. The difference between climate finance and foreign assistance is that foreign assistance or foreign aid was supply-side driven. The donor determined what they want to give to you and when. Climate finance is demand-side driven. We have to demand, with the help of our accreditation, that you get the license to apply. Second, the quality, and then you compete with others. And when you compete with others, then you also compete with the institutional priorities and other considerations. Yes, we are free to apply for green financing projects in agriculture, in water, in health, in sanitation, in urban planning, and you name it, and just for every area has a relevance to climate change, and we can apply them. We are free to. In many cases, we may not have even the frameworks or policies that will support them. In some cases, the departments may not know that this is a climate-related issue. And therefore, the prospects of Pakistan getting green financing are relatively limited at this time, unless we invest on the clarity and the roadmap that how we will go about it. But now, yes, we have the framework in National Adaptation Plan, but we don't have the tools and the skills to translate that into action with the help of international finance.
Then there is a question from Dr. Mohsen Zafar. He is asking about, did ever Pakistan received any support from Climate Green Fund? If yes, where it has been utilized and who was the beneficiaries?
As I mentioned,
excuse me, sir, आपकी आवाज थोड़ी सी कम हो गई है. I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
This better.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, for Green Climate Fund and for Adaptation Fund, you need accreditation. Accreditation is a difficult process, and Pakistan has not received official accreditation so far. The financing Pakistan has accessed in 2 or 3 projects is through intermediaries. Intermediaries means ADB, for example, applied and got financing for a transportation sector project for Karachi that has provided low emissions buses. FAO in the water sector, that is an ongoing project. And there may be 1 or 2 other relatively smaller projects applied through intermediaries. Pakistan has not directly accessed any financing from GCF because we have not secured accreditation. There are 2 or 3 organizations in Pakistan, such as Equipment Fund or such as NRSP or Silk Bank. They have secured accreditation, but this is the lowest ring of accreditation. The sovereign is big one. For example, in India, their Agriculture Development Bank had has that accreditation. They can secure funds, multi-million-dollar projects. In comparison, these are non-governmental entities that are secured, and they can access funds to the tune of less than 10 or 50, depending the category. And so far, they have not secured or submitted any application, any 3 of them. There are 3 more organizations that are working presently to secure accreditation. They are also in the same category. Punjab Bank is one. Habib Bank is another one, but nothing like the scale of Agriculture Development Bank that has an experience of supporting loans and farmers in the agriculture sector across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tauqeer Saab. My question, I have a question, if you allow me. So, you rightly mentioned in the beginning of your talk that there is an technical incapacity to tap these funds, particularly Global Green Climate Fund, actually, GCF. And you have rightly mentioned that India has tapped and we don't have accreditation costs. So what do you think, where it lacks the capacity? Is that the complete diaspora of climate change experts and all these things? Or it's the ministry level things that have been very, I would say, dormant and not unwilling to tap all these opportunities? And it's even a very tedious job and it's beyond our thinking or something like this.
See, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. Allow me to repeat a sentence from my previous answer. that is, it's a demand side driven, meaning by if a department, let's say irrigation department is interested in a $300 or $500 million project spreading over 3 or 4 or 5 years. That means they need to have a demand, they need to know what they wish to do, and then they need to anchor that with the national policies, and then they develop the proposal. It's their demand. In reality, what we have done is we have outsourced thinking. Irrigation department will not do any of that, but will expect from some donors such as ADB or FAO or IFAD or somebody else to develop a proposal, and then we will be happy to sign the dotted line as soon as we know that some dollars are coming. Now, you cannot outsource thinking, and you cannot source thinking also because the financing has become very complex. Oftentimes, the other meeting that I'm right now attending deals with the same issue. Please remember that GCF financing is not all grant. It's a hybrid. And they'll give you lots of money to prepare the proposal. But then when the actual proposal is funded, it is a very complex hybrid of loan, grant, private sector investment, your equity, and then public-private sector, private sector equity. So it becomes a very, very complex exercise to do it. Countries like Pakistan, and particular Pakistan, have not really overcome to understand what does GCF mean. GCF is not that they're sitting on the checkbook and we write a proposal and they'll fund you. They will go component by component to see which component they wish to support. And the grant preparation, proposal preparation grant that they give you, $2, $3, $5 million, that is to enable you to undertake other exercises of bringing private sector equity, negotiating your own equity, building a component of public-private partnership, building in academia and universities for R&D purposes. So it is a full-fledged exercise, and the government of Pakistan has, since it has outsourced thinking, they don't work on these things. They expect from others to do it. Professor Fahim, you will understand this. I have worked for non-profit. I know this. Even the smallest of NGOs do not outsource thinking. Academic proposals are written by people like you and your seniors and juniors and students. The ownership is internal. You don't outsource thinking. Yes, sometimes you reach out to others for partnership, just the way others come to you sometimes for partnership. But even then, you negotiate your part and the role and responsibilities you'll have for your part. So it is a very, very complex science in itself. It has a system that government of Pakistan has not adopted as yet.
Exactly. There was a point. It hurt me that our neighbor country has tapped so many grants from GCF, and we hardly could make it. And even through the third party, which actually will not realize, as you mentioned in the beginning of your talk, that they have a stature of a donor. So they have their own agenda to implement a sort of thing, rather than they will prioritize our problem, our on-ground realities. So I guess I will totally agree with you, and you also agree with me that the Ministry of Climate Change has to be very instrumental in this, and they have to, because I personally share with you that they only share this kind of information at the very 11th hour. And when you look in the proposal, it's really a science in itself to prepare a proposal. And then having other compulsions, so we are unable to respond in very limited time, like a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. It's very difficult to answer all these queries they have raised and to architect in a way that it could be successful. So still, it's a very challenge. And I think the ministry should think of such facilitation or capacity building for all the sectors to take maximum benefit out of such initiatives.
That is correct.
One fundamental question, last question from my side, and then we will wrap up this session. So it's about What do you think? Why the international community has not responded promptly and also not provide the aid in response to year 2022 flood? Even till date, I have some information that they are not provided the promised amount to rehabilitate the factories of 2022 flood.
I want to respond at 3 levels. First level, I think, is if I can read your mind, is about us. Maybe we don't have the credibility. Maybe they don't trust us. Maybe we are not something or the other. That's one part. And the second part is, where is the global discourse to support others? That's the second part. And third part is, where is the money and where are the priorities? Let me answer all these 3 questions. First, let me take the middle question. There was a time when the foreign assistance or aid was a very big commitment. And it was going to all developing countries and least developed countries. And after the disasters, there used to be, even when there was no foreign assistance, there used to be a term that was used, humanitarian aid and assistance. Of all the 20 appeals by UN Secretary General for humanitarian assistance have failed. The donors don't give that money anymore. Instead, they thought that instead of giving humanitarian assistance, and they still do very nominal, only for a flagship presence that we don't want to be absent. If UK is giving, Germany will say, or France would say, we also need to be there. So they'll send also a dozen bottles of water or something. But for visibility purposes, in reality, they said humanitarian assistance is non-rewarding. It has to be built back better. So they want to invest in resilience. They want to give you for resilience. And for resilience, you need to have a plan. You need to have a game plan, how we want to go. And many countries like Pakistan don't have a game plan, and I'll explain that with the help of my third answer. But let me first come to this other part. Where are their priorities? The mindset for decades was that the climate change will be a developing country problem, and the Western countries, developed countries, will not be affected. But now we see that it is hitting them. They're having forest fires, they're having droughts, they're having flooding, and they're breaking world records with much faster speed than Pakistan. Each country from Canada, many states of the US, Australia, Europe, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe. So they have their own priorities now. And their economies don't have extra money to give, especially for a non-transparent transaction. And plus, if there's a little bit more money, their priorities may be different. This may be Ukrainian war. This may be Haiti and not Pakistan. This may be Pakistan, but not Bangladesh. This may be Africa, not Asia. So each country will have its own set of priorities. And the priority is not determined by the degree of our vulnerability. Please remember, that's why I started my conversation with this. Pakistan is not the most vulnerable country. It's the least prepared country. We specialize in playing the victim card, that I'm the most vulnerable, and therefore the world should pay us for vulnerability. Please remember, that's not the discourse. The course is different. Now I want to come to the Pakistani side. Pakistan is ill-prepared to receive international finance. We don't know how to spend. We don't know how to spend meaningfully. We don't know how to spend transparently. And therefore, the international commitments to Pakistan are far less than they would be if we were better prepared, if we had a better absorption capacity. Someone asked a question about GCF. You will not believe that for first project that we got on GLOF, it was a 3-year project, and for 3 years we could not open the bank account. And then we submitted a proposal for second phase. Same thing happened with the largest project that we got with the help of FA and water sector. The government of Punjab apparently had committed that will give $10 million worth of contribution. And that made the FAO proposal a winning proposal there, that the government equity is there. You remember I said it's very complex now. Now, once that happened, federal government refused to sign it, saying, who is the government of Punjab to commit it? Where is the money? So this was the internal legal battle that we started between the provinces and the departments and so forth. And here comes ADB, the first project they had for transportation in Karachi. My discussion with ADB was that we find it very hard to spend our own money that we have, let alone accessing additional money for our country. I hope you understand. If they're saying if we cannot spend our own meat and our own target in a country, how can we take up additional targets upon ourselves? But they brought that for their own political purposes, which I say for some other occasion. The result is that it worked only because they were not giving the money to Pakistan and spending it themselves. All the procurement was done by them. So, in other words, Pakistan's readiness to accept hinges on how credible our data is, how fast our spending processes are, how transparent and accountable they are, and how relevant they are. Relevant, I'm giving a long answer because I assume there are many students. Please bear with me. Relevant means if they're giving us money for something X, we cannot spend on Y, no matter how important that is. If they're given money for year A, we cannot spend it 4 years later and then repurpose on COVID or flood or something else. And that is where the Pakistan has built the habit. Because our systems are not in place, in every project, GCF, World Bank, ADB, others, we will have underspent. It will drag for many years. We'll pay the capacity charges. And when some emergency hits us, we will harvest that and give it on to COVID as we did, and give it to floods as we did. And the international donors do not want that. Sometimes they feel good.
Thank you very much, Ali Tauqeer Sahab. And thank you very much, Imdad and Siddiqui Sahab, for enlightening the audience with your valuable insight and experience about flood 2022 and their implications in socioeconomic circles of Pakistan. I'm really honored to have hosted both of you, and I'm thankful from HESSA, this initiatives, and HEC and the NUST in particular, that you honored this webinar by sharing your valuable insights. I would like to take opportunity to thank you all the participants by sparing time and participating very actively in this session, and especially in the Q&A session. So let's, I request all the audience if they could on their video streaming that we have a group photo of the webinar quickly. Please turn on your video cameras so that everybody, Arsil, can you take a picture? I hope it's...
Yes, sure we can take.
Please.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Everyone. Yes, please.
Ready?
I guess it's done.
Yes, done.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you again. And I would like to extend my thanks to the HESSA team who has facilitated for technical support and for all this webinar to happen. Thank you very much, especially Arsil, and Osama, who has been facilitating us. So thank you very much. So see you next. Take care. Bye-bye. Allah Hafiz.